What's up, guys? I just want to give a quick little intro onto the channel, onto the page. If you happen to find yourself here listening, I don't know how you did. I'm sure this is probably not going to reach too many people. But if you do, by a miracle of the algorithm gods, or I don't know, your weird, obscure interest, thank you so much. But besides that, I just want to give a quick little intro onto what this channel, or what this page, or whatever this is going to be. So if you want to follow for in the future, I just hope to shine a light with this page. I hope to shine a light on different topics that I find interesting, that I feel have gone like under the radar. I've covered, or not covered yet, but I've watched so much different true crime and mystery, and listened to so many different true crime and mystery podcasts, and that's really not a flex. I probably could be spending my time a lot better, but more productive, but anyways, yeah, that's not a flex, but I feel like everyone knows the most popular cases and knows the most popular stories, for that matter, like the top of the iceberg. But as you go and you hear about these little bit weirder stories, these stories that not many people have heard of, I feel like they're a little more interesting. But regardless, but yeah, guys, again, thank you so much if you found yourself here. Before we get into it, again, Happy New Year. Hope everyone is well. Hope the year is treating you well. And again, this is the very first video or the very first podcast or whatever the hell this is going to be that I've ever made. So hopefully there's room for improvement, and let's see how this works out. But yeah, guys, thank you so much for finding yourself here. Let's get into it. Episode 1, the French horse mutilations. Starting during the first global-wide lockdown of the COVID-19 virus in early spring 2020, mysterious and sinister reports started appearing out of the rural regions and farms in the countryside of France. Cases involving reports of animal abuse, dismemberment, and mutilations, with dark undertones and motives, quickly caught the attention of the police and the public. With a handful of these cases spread throughout the country, initially, many early reports were concluded as some sort of natural cause and dismissed. But as soon, more and more cases kept popping up, the undeniable fact that something strange was occurring with the horses and other farm animals of France. One of the more worrying and troublesome reports came out in June 2020 from a woman named Pauline Sarrazin of Normandy, who one morning found her mare named Lady with terrible injuries to her face, with her skin peeled back and her right ear severed and gone. The horse was still alive, but unfortunately shortly passed due to the injuries. Pauline assumed, by looking at the extent of the injuries, that this could have been the result of an acid attack, but no evidence could be officially determined. Not only that, but this is where things start to take an even darker turn than initially suspected. Any kind of animal abuse in of itself is disgusting and terrible, so when sporadic acts of violence were popping up in the beginning, officials thought this to be explainable and limited to circumstance. But as word spread between the farmers, reports of a mysterious link connected all these cases throughout the country. Specifically, the mutilation of the right ear, removal of the genitalia, and in a lot of cases, the animal's right eye was also targeted. Another common MO was that of surgically clean cuts, with many of the farmers stating that whoever had done this must have had familiarity to these animals, whether horses or in some cases donkeys. Many farmers or officials suspected that the person responsible for the attacks must have had experience as either a vet or a butcher. With one horse breeder named John Michel Martineau, whose horse's name Jade had been strangled and stabbed to death, stated, and I quote, "Although sociable at times, these are fear-driven animals, and for someone to do this, they'd have to have knowledge of horses, and considering the wounds, would have to have knowledge of the anatomy of the animal." End quote. With all these mysterious facts emerging, it was clear that there was a pattern forming, and there was something much more sinister than a couple of random occurrences at hand. Of the wild beliefs ranging from extraterrestrials responsible to blood harvesting for vaccines, one of the most common beliefs of the public that began to form was that of Satanism and occult ritual abuse. Since a lot of the evidence seemed to point that direction, with mutilation of the right ear along with the removal of the genitalia having symbolic significance within Satanism. Along with the fact that there was nothing ever stolen, no animal meat was ever harvested, and the attacker specifically targeted certain animals, all lends to that same idea. One of the stranger and more disturbing details that were reported from earlier victim Pauline Sarrazin was that in the days leading up to the attack, there had been sightings of drones flying over her property at night, suspicious appearance of people wandering through her fields, and an odd call came in of a suspicious figure claiming to be a vet asking her details of her stable and her horses that she owned. With all these details and more cases emerging throughout the countryside, police began to launch their own investigations into this matter, and as they did, the most brazen and non-deniable event of the series took place. On a night around 10 p.m. in late August, Nicolas Demajean, an older farmer located in central France, begins to tuck into bed for the night when he hears his pigs squealing and shrieking from their pen outside. He gets up and begins to go inspect what the disturbance is, and for an older man with the need of a cane to get around, this is no easy task. But as he slowly makes his way outside, he is immediately confronted by two armed men when instead of fleeing in fear of being discovered, they lunge straight towards the older man, slashing him right across the arm with a long blade. As both men come towards Mr. Demajean, he puts up a struggle, fighting back, using his cane as a weapon, striking one of the attackers across the back. Luckily, because of all this commotion going on, Mr. Demajean's dog is alerted and comes running to his aid. Finally, with the help of his dog, he's able to ward off the men as they flee, getting into a 4x4 vehicle and disappearing into the night. After this event, Mr. Demajean is understandably shaken. He assesses his wounds and then his property, and that's when he finds that the two men had slashed and attacked two of his horses and two of his ponies, leaving deep wounds on the side of the animals. This event, though, now marked a significant point, because up until then, all theory of human involvement was only speculation. No one had seen an actual attacker of the animals, but in Mr. Demajean's case, this proved not only one suspect, but a pair of attackers on his farm. And with so many cases spread throughout the country in such a short period of time, authorities started to question if this could be the work of a couple lone individuals, or this could possibly be the work of a larger collective group responsible for these attacks. Another interesting piece that comes from Mr. Demajean's case is that he was able to get a good look at one of his attacker's face, detailed enough for authorities to come up with a digital sketch to be spread out to the public for any information on who this could possibly be. With all this new information and word of the Demajean attack, police began to ramp up nationwide hunt on who could possibly be responsible, forming task forces and launching an initiative called Operation Warhorse, which had French police forces having all-night surveillance in full camouflage on certain farms and properties, using night vision goggles and other tools. From all the reports, no major news or events ever took place from these nighttime stakeouts of farms, adding to the mystery of who and how this was done. On September 7th, 2020, police announced that they had made an arrest, with a caller giving them a name that they had suspected matched the digital sketch released earlier. And after intensive questioning, that suspect was later released after authorities had no real evidence that this was the man responsible. And as the year came to an end, authorities made a couple of different arrests here and there throughout the country for small different offenses, but were never able to link a proof of conspiracy or network of individuals responsible, as no real motive was ever proven, no group identified, no solid evidence as a whole. In December, authorities released the finding of the report which they had been working on, stating that out of more than 500 cases reported, only 16% were proven to have any human involvement. All others could be explained in some sort of natural or normal circumstance. And although many didn't believe the official findings, this was the most logical explanation concluded by the experts and officials working the case. Some interesting examples throughout the past that seem to resemble the same phenomenon quite close began emerging. One was the story told by Swiss police officer and forensic expert Oliver Ribaux, who after hearing about the story of the French horse mutilations was reminded of an eerily similar case he had worked from 15 years earlier, in 2005. Ribaux was working as an analyst with the Swiss police when the force was hunting a mysterious killer dubbed the Sadist by press, whom they believed was attacking animals and taking ears and genitals from their corpses as trophies. Amid a media frenzy, police began 24-hour surveillance of fields, while suspicious animal owners harassed tourists lingering near their fields. And although all attention and resources used, no arrests were ever made. In 2017, head of the judicial police Oliver Guinois, who was actively investigating, told Ribaux he had cracked the case of the Sadist. "I know who it is," he told me, Ribaux recalls. "It was a fox." Soon after, Swiss police announced their findings publicly. In most of the cases, there was no evidence of human intervention, just as in France 15 years later. The Sadist never existed. Forensic experiments had shown what initial observations had failed to realize. Most of the incisions that were described as quote-unquote surgically sharp and attributed to knife and blades were in fact the mark of sharp teeth of a fox or similar like scavengers. a theory confirmed by DNA samples. An interesting finding that casts doubt on the Satanism theory and is most logical to explain. Also, lending weight to that theory, another case 40 years earlier, British police investigated a horse ripper suspected of killing 160 animals between 1983 and 1993, and just as in France nearly 40 years later, widely reported theories suggested Satanists or even pedophiles were responsible behind the deaths, but no convictions were ever made. In 2001, after 2 decades of investigations, a former police officer declared working that case that most of the injuries were caused by accident or by other animals. And again, although all rational science suggested this is the answer to the case, it just seems like there's something more.
His mares one morning in August, as he did every morning. He discovered 14-month-old Jade was missing. He later found her under a tree.
She had strangulation marks. We assumed that they lassoed her, and they must have lassoed her to the tree before stabbing her. See this horrible sight, you are in shock.
Since February, France has been shaken by the mystery of mutilated horses, and the phenomenon has accelerated in recent weeks. Nearly every day in the 4 corners of France, in isolated fields, strangers randomly kill horses at night, but attacking horses like Jade is not something anyone would know how to do. Revealed some of the motivations of the horse cutters. One that stands out is that of witchcraft.
We sacrifice the animal, thinking that the energy of the animal, its power, will be transferred to us. The genitals are more for a ritual of sexuality or fertility. The recovered blood, the eye, the right ear, it is the ritual of invocation, bewitchment, or transfer of power. And you will notice that it's always the right ear which is cut off, because the left ear is Satan.
Katie Dartford for Euronews.
And that, guys, is at the end of the video, end of the audio. If you're listening to this just audio, I want to thank you so much for joining me. If you happen to listen all the way to the end, I can't thank you enough. Considering this is my first video, it'd mean the world, whatever platform you happen to be listening to this on, to show support, whether that's a like or a subscription or a positive review. Again, Happy New Year's to everybody. I hope you guys have a good one. Take care.